Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Minister. We've had a very lively and informative morning. I don't think you'll be surprised to hear, having met with some of these people before. I started off sort of contemplating, we're fast approaching the first birthday of this child that we all know and love, called the Green Deal. I did speculate as to whether it was a real child, whether it would have been taken into care because of some of the abuse that it suffered and some of the bullying
Not at the hand of its
in the
parents.
playground, not obviously at the hands of its loving parents. But we've heard, I think, a really lively discussion where we have obviously tackled head-on some of the challenges obviously we face. But I'd like to say that I think the main thrust of our discussion is about where do we go from here. How do we make the best of some of the rather unforeseen and rather painful developments late autumn around eco and the wider set of incentives and where that's taken us, and what we need to learn from that first year of experience. But that's enough from me. I'd like to hear from you about your view of Green Deal going forwards, and then we'll take a few questions from them.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to the UK Green Building Council for hosting this today. And I would just say there are lots of voices out there with views on this whole agenda and Green Deal specifically, and I particularly value the thoughts and comments and input from the UK-GBC. I think you and John are amongst certainly robust, very evidence-based, sometimes critical, but always fair. And so I think in terms of the informed voices that we pay particular attention to, I'd say you were right up there at the top. So I'm delighted to be here this morning and to have the opportunity to talk to this forum. As you say, as we approach the anniversary of the Green Deal and also the publication of the report by the UK Green Building Council. Constructive feedback and engagement, absolutely key to helping make the Green Deal a success, and we remain absolutely invested in making the Green Deal a success. There are 3 points really that I want to stress in my speech today. Firstly, I want to look back a little and reflect on the Green Deal's first year. And despite the critics, some criticism justified, some less so, I believe the programme has had an encouraging start. Secondly, I want to update you on the progress we're making to implement improvements to the programme, having listened very carefully and continuing to listen to feedback from consumers and from industry. And thirdly, I want to tell you how we're planning on going further, much further, and the work in hand with industry to really drive this programme forward now. So to begin with, let me just give you a little bit of context. Since day one of coming into government, the coalition has been absolutely committed to doing more to help people heat and light their homes more efficiently and more affordably. We know that hard-working families have been hit over successive years by rising costs of gas and electricity, and we know that this is particularly hard given that Britain has some of the oldest, leakiest and most inefficient homes in Europe. Consequently, the coalition has promoted energy efficiency, not just with the Green Deal, but right across the board, in a way that I don't think any government has attempted to do that before, and given it a priority that no government has given it before. Not least, you can see that in the way that one of the first things we did on coming into office was actually to form a unit dedicated to rolling out energy efficiency measures right across the board and to driving energy efficiency policy. Unbelievably, when we got to the department, there was no unit for the deployment of energy efficiency, and now we've put that right, and energy efficiency sits up there alongside renewables, alongside nuclear, alongside oil and gas, and absolutely right that it does so. So we see the importance of energy efficiency both to society on the impact on families and individuals, but also to the economy. It can not only save individuals and businesses money, but it also has many wider benefits as well. It can drive investment in our economy, helping the UK industry to compete in the global race with skills and growth. It can strengthen our security of supply. It can increase the resilience of our energy economy. It can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this government aims to improve that relationship, to enhance that relationship between demand and supply, developing an energy efficiency market where consumers are more than just aware of the beneficial options available to them, but actually empowered to act, and where companies deliver profit-making energy efficiency services as a matter of course, rather than the only way to make money out of energy being just simply to sell more and more gas or more and more oil or more and more electrons. Now, central to this vision is the Green Deal. The Green Deal is a world first and a long-term initiative designed to upgrade the energy efficiency of Britain's homes. It is, as I said before it launched, the most ambitious home improvement programme since the Second World War. But it is exactly that, a home improvement programme. It is not just a programme to shift finance plans. It has created a new trustworthy market to empower consumers to choose which energy saving improvements are needed to make their homes warmer and cheaper to run, more energy efficiency. It's created a market that's allowing people to take more control over their energy bills. It has created, importantly, a market of clearly branded, trusted measures, trusted installers, trusted assessors, and trusted companies. At the very heart, the very essence of the Green Deal is this strong consumer confidence in the whole Green Deal brand, in this whole trust that there is in Green Deal certified people, measures, and technologies. Now, the Green Deal is radical. It's opening up new choices and simultaneously new products and even services. And as I said in my introduction, it has been, on balance, an encouraging first year for the Green Deal. You know, I know, it hasn't developed exactly in the way that we anticipated, in large part due to a very slow and I'd say disappointing start from the Big Six, who haven't delivered Green Deal offers to their consumers in the way that we expected and were led to believe when we were planning the Green Deal. But on the other hand, the other thing that surprised us, and hasn't been as anticipated, has been the terrific, extraordinary growth from SMEs. And it is the SMEs, it is the entrepreneurs, it is the disruptive new entrants into this market that are really showing how you grow an energy efficiency business profitably and to the benefit of consumers. It is the SMEs who are actually creating this market at scale. It is the entrepreneurial new entrants who are really shaping the new energy efficiency market that is growing all around us. And together with the ECO, the Green Deal has now improved in the last 11 months 400,000 homes. And in actual fact, the number who've actually installed Green Deal measures is significantly greater than that. And crucially, it is the number of measures installed, not the number of Green Deal finance plans, which ultimately will be the focus of success or failure of the Green Deal. Now, to a certain extent, we are the victim of our own political focus here, because it's absolutely true. One of the most novel things of the Green Deal legislation was this measure to allow you to attach a finance plan to an electricity meter. Very important, groundbreaking, measure, and it is one of the biggest differentiators of the Green Deal from previous government schemes. The reason that we put so much emphasis on that particular measure is because all of the research, all of the feedback that we had to date told us that the biggest single barrier to consumers taking up energy efficiency measures by themselves, leaving apart those measures which are installed with 100% subsidy as part of a rollout scheme, but looking at the self-paying, self-funding market, the biggest barriers to take up of all of these exciting, sensible, no-brainer measures was finance. Finance was the biggest barrier to deployment. The interesting thing has been that having opened up this market and broken down that barrier, once people get in, once people have the Green Deal assessment, and over nearly 130,000 people now have had Green Deal assessments, the really interesting thing is once you get around their kitchen table, and I don't know how many of you in this room have actually had Green Deal assessments, but actually I think it's a surprisingly intimate process. I've not only had my own, but have sat in on others. And it's not a rush through, it's not a tick box proposition, and the good assessors really sit down and take the time to have a one-to-one discussion. It's not a hard sell, but it is explaining to people in their own home how they can make improvements that are right for that particular property. And it's not surprising that the feedback that we get from that process is incredibly positive. It's a huge, huge vote of confidence in the supply chain that over 87% of people in our latest data that's released today are satisfied with the quality of the measures installed. 81% of people who have had a Green Deal assessment are telling us that they are then moving on to actually install measures as a result. 81% of people who have a Green Deal assessment are saying that they are then moving on to install some or all of the measures recommended. That is tremendous. That is the real, real truth about, is this a genuine market? Is it or is it not taking up? Now there is a inherent difficulty here in that most of them, to date, are not taking up Green Deal finance to install those measures. The statistics speak for themselves. I think there are, broadly speaking, about 1,800 plans in the system at the moment. So it is working. There are plans there. The finance is starting to flow, but it's certainly way below the 10,000 plans that I thought would be written in the first year. But this is the difference. I thought that the 10,000 plans would basically be the number of people taking up the Green Deal. I didn't think that the split between self-pay and Green Deal finance would be quite so wide. I didn't realise that people would be, once they'd had a Green Deal assessment, would be quite so seized of the need and imperative and desirability of installing these things. And so it's not really surprising that when it's explained to people at length, they say, well, why would I, if I can have the option available to me, not take all of these savings now, particularly if I'm sitting on cash in the building society or in the bank that's earning the square root of nothing in the current interest rate environment, and not go on and put these measures in. Now, I think that's going to change, because it also stands to reason that the first 120,000 or so, many of those are the classic early adopters. They are people who've been waiting for these measures. They are people who are predisposed to see the sense in it, and for whom, I guess, they're less likely to be inhibited by those barriers to finance. The big question is, if we're going to roll out and scale up, we have to recognise that we then will increasingly come up against those barriers to deployment, where finance will become more and more of an issue as it becomes more of a mass market. So we mustn't think that because so many people in the first phase of the Green Deal have opted to self-pay for measures, that means that going forward, Green Deal finance, Green Deal plans won't be critically important. They will be, because even at 130, I mean, maybe we'll get to 150,000 over the full first 12 months. That's still just scratching the surface. That is still just the very beginning of the creation of the Green Deal market. Really, even with 150,000 assessments and over 80% of those going on to install measures, that is still really about proving the supply chain, establishing trust in the brand and certification, letting suppliers, letting new entrants make sure that their systems work, and allowing the over 125 authorised Green Deal providers, the 2,900 advisors registered to carry out Green Deal assessments, and over 2,300 organisations now officially approved to carry out green installations, about all of those to really create a genuine national supply chain for Green Deal. We haven't really begun the lift-off yet to really scale up. But I would say that does mean the foundations are there. And there are good signals of growth, but we do now, having got those foundations in, need to inject more momentum into the scheme. And to do that, there are new incentives to drive up demand, but we're also going to make a series of improvements to the Green Deal itself. And that's not this isn't a fundamental change, but just in the same way that, the iPhone is now on its iPhone 5, isn't it? The constant iterations. Anyone bringing a new product, particularly such an innovative product, to the market doesn't stand still, and certainly doesn't launch it into the market and then ignore consumer feedback. You stay with it. And this is where the partnership with the private sector, where it is so vital, where it's so important that we work with you to see now we take a concept that we brought to the market, that we created legislation for. Now we can see how it actually works in practice, that we can iterate it, we can improve it, and we'll continue to do so. And what we'll see this year is not one-off improvements, then we'll stand back and walk away, but we will stay with it, and we will continue to work with the market as the market develops, continuing to see how we can increase the consumer experience and the value to the consumer of the Green Deal proposition. Now that brings me to my second point. We've been listening very carefully to feedback from industry. We've listened to consumers, and we've listened to wider stakeholders, recognising the need to balance ambition against people's immediate concerns, particularly the concerns of consumers who fund any subsidy for energy efficiency or renewables or any other government scheme through their bills or through taxes. Now, in December, we announced a £540 million, over £500 million, 3-year energy efficiency package for home movers, landlords and public sector buildings, as well as our proposals to streamline the Green Deal. Of that, £450 million will fund rebates for home movers and to help private landlords improve their properties' energy efficiency. Home movers and the much neglected private rented sector will be at the forefront this year of our drive to push momentum into the Green Deal. And with that, we'll be supporting supply chain jobs and really drive take-up. But in addition to that £450 million, we have quadrupled, as a result of that announcement in December, we have quadrupled funds available to local authorities this year to £80 million to promote and drive forward the Green Deal on a street-by-street basis, incentivising the delivery of hard-to-treat cavity and solid wall insulation in particular. But overall, the street-by-street model is critically important to the long-term rollout of the Green Deal. It has always been my view from the very get-go that if we're going to scale up and offer the Green Deal comprehensively and targeted at the communities that need it most, which means having a real priority on the fuel poor. We have to do that in a holistic, localised, community-based way, with street-by-street rollout at its heart, capturing the economies of scale, capturing the opportunities to do this in a much more holistic way. And we've had a terrific response to our Green Deal Communities programme that this £80 million will now support. Terrific response from local authorities. We'll be shortly announcing the first successful bidders. But I have to say, we've been deluged with bidders from right the way across the country, not just Conservative controlled councils, not just Lib Dem councils, but from local authorities of all colours that have come forward, constructively engaging in this agenda, coming forward with proposals of how they believe they can make the Green Deal work in their areas and are keen to participate, but at its heart is a street-by-street community rollout. And that, I think, won't happen overnight. We will be announcing that shortly, the first phase, and the second phase behind that, and then it will actually see measures on the ground implemented later in the year, and rollout really begin, I'm guessing, in the autumn. But that long-term rollout on a street-by-street basis is really going to put rocket boosters under the Green Deal. Now, in addition to that, we have extended the current Green Deal cashback scheme to June and reviewed the values, including uplifting solid wall insulation cashback to £4,000. £4,000 cash for solid wall insulation, a real boost for that particular market. And we've also worked with energy companies to promote a stronger mix of eco and Green Deal finance. And if we are going to genuinely get the Green Deal, and particularly Green Deal finance plans, beyond just a few, this is the market we have to crack. And it's not easy, don't anyone tell you otherwise. In order to get a greater blending, or indeed any blending, of eco and Green Deal finance, we have to work much harder, but we also need much better engagement, particularly from the big six. But it's a big prize because there is ultimately a finite pot of eco subsidy. But if we can leverage that eco subsidy with Green Deal finance where appropriate, it means that it will go that much further. Even if, broadly speaking, if you do it on £1 of Green Deal finance for £3 of eco leverage, you get hundreds of thousands more programs delivered as a result. It has to make sense. And to further that whole process, we've been listening very carefully to Green Deal providers, picking up their thoughts on a number of, in themselves, relatively small improvements that can be made to the Green Deal process, but which cumulatively actually will help smooth and ease the application of the Green Deal by providers and installers. We've established a Green Deal working group led by Surian Cheshire, the Chief Executive of Kingfisher, but also pulling into that the key new SMEs that are actually rolling out and driving this product. And they're very clearly tasked to come up with recommendations to help simplify the Green Deal process, to make it easier for both consumers to access and also for SMEs to install measures. And we've very clearly picked up the feedback from stakeholders and installers that it needs to be simpler, that the principle is absolutely right, the model is right, but we need to streamline it further, and that we are doing. So over the coming weeks, we will be announcing further improvements to the Green Deal, such as enabling consumers to complete a Green Deal finance plan in one day, and making further incremental but very, very useful adjustments to Green Deal finance, all designed to make it easier, simpler for the consumer and for the installer. And I think Green Deal finance in a day will be a great boost. Details will come forward shortly on the new homeowners energy efficiency rebate, the stamp duty rebate for movers. There'll be further Green Deal incentives to drive the market, including a substantial government-led marketing campaign, including messages to catalyse action around the time of the launch of the domestic RHI this spring. And it's bringing together the RHI, the feed-in tariff supported technologies, particularly solar PV, and energy efficiency measures in one coherent consumer-facing whole that is my, I think, big challenge for this year and what I want to do. For too long, these different programmes have sat in their different silos and depth. In 2014, it has to be the year when we pull them all together and present them to the consumer as one coherent whole. Now, we've already been in close contact with many of you here in the room, and I would continue to encourage you to work with us, to work with my excellent team of officials, some of whom are here today, because while I'm giving you an indication of the many things that we are doing this year to drive the Green Deal forward, we're not done yet, and we greatly value the feedback that we get from you. Because ultimately, the Green Deal will succeed or fail not on the basis of any one government incentive, not on the basis of any one particular adjustment, but on the partnership that there is between government and the private sector, between government and the key stakeholders. That is what makes the Green Deal so different. This is not a cosy deal between the government and the big six like CERT was. This is an open-ended market, highly competitive, pulling in new entrants, pulling in new entrepreneurs, in some cases even helping create new companies, creating new choices for consumers. And that is what I really want to finish on. That this is the year of Green Deal collaboration to make it work. So I don't want to raise unrealistic expectations about what we're going to be able to achieve this year, but over 129,000 Green Deal assessments in 11 months, leading to over 80% taking action, with over 87% satisfaction rating, this is a great base on which to now build, to scale up, to mobilise, and in 2014, with your help, I really think we will.
Thank you. A little while before you joined us, I was putting a question actually to some of our industry colleagues about the events last autumn, when suddenly the issue of energy bills and so on suddenly became headline news in a way that we've probably never seen before. And in the wake of that, the Prime Minister took a decision to order a review of green levies. And having heard evidence from a range of stakeholders, notably I think perhaps from the Big Six, but also obviously some of the people in this room as well, he took a decision to prioritise offering people a short-term saving, 50 quid off their energy bills, rather than arguing the case, which perhaps your department might do, for long-term investment in energy saving measures, which are the only way to keep people's energy bills down permanently and significantly over the longer term. Was he wrong?
No, he wasn't wrong. And the two are not mutually exclusive. But, I think this room is full of people who have a vested interest in the energy efficiency market. That's where you make your money. I believe in markets, that's a good thing. But the Prime Minister has a responsibility to everybody, not just to one particular supply chain. And most importantly, he has a responsibility to people who are worried now, not in 2 years' time, not in 3 years' time or in 5 years' time, but worried now, this winter, about rising fuel bills and about rising cost of living. Now, Ed Miliband cottoned onto that and put that on the agenda with his speech, I think, on the 24th of September. Now, we would violently disagree with the proposal to intervene in such an arbitrary, clumsy way in the market as Ed Miliband proposed. But he was nevertheless tapping into a genuine concern about energy bills that we are concerned about as well. And I think what the Prime Minister did wasn't to have a knee-jerk reaction, but was to recognise in a thoughtful way that there isn't one easy solution to this, but you can't ignore the short term at the expense of the long term, nor can you ignore the long term at the expense of the short term. And I think what we actually came up with was a very balanced package that recognised that we needed to show immediate help for consumers this winter and next winter. I'm taking £50
off bills may not sound much to people in this room, but there are a lot of families for whom that £50 actually is very welcome and is very reassuring. But you're right, Paul, that's not a substitute for long-term action. And I think the fact that we also, in the same package, announced that we were extending ECO out to 2017, meaning that for the first time we have this long-term horizon against which people can now invest. Compare that to the CERT programme, which was originally just for 1 year and extended and then extended again. But real investment clarity for the supply chain on ECO. And I think we've got a framework that I've just articulated in great detail in the Green Deal. But we've got to make that work. And there are hard-working families out there can't wait while the supply chain grows. They need a response this winter, next winter. But you're absolutely right. The long-term response must be energy efficiency improvements.
I mean, the point behind my question, I guess, is a theme that's been running through the course of today's discussion, which is how do we make energy efficiency the national infrastructure priority it deserves to be, that stands full square, shoulder to shoulder with HS2, with the future airport expansion, with the nuclear industry, with fracking. I mean, a week after the Prime Minister made his decision in terms of which way to go in the autumn, the National Insulation Association paused proceedings at their conference to watch an excerpt from the Chancellor's autumn statement, where he announced subsidies for the fracking industry, underwriting for the nuclear industry, at the same time as talking about cuts to ECO. And I simply make that point because it framed for that audience and for this audience a real challenge here.
Let's be clear about it. The fracking industry doesn't take £2 billion a year out of people's energy bills. Let's get real, and when we're talking about subsidies for fossil fuels are a net major contributor to the Treasury. The ECO programme adds money to people's bills. It costs billions of pounds over the lifetime of this Parliament, billions and billions of pounds, a huge, colossal number. So let's not be flippant with people's bills. Let's not be flippant with the very, very substantial numbers that are behind the rollout of highly subsidised, in some cases 100% subsidised measures. The ECO programme is offering 100% subsidy. Now, it's just not correct, Paul, to compare that on a like-for-like basis with the other measures that you mentioned. Yes, there is strategic subsidy for a whole range of things, but most of the projects that you're talking rely on the private sector to fund that. And so we need to bear that in mind. So when I see the special pleading from the insulation industry about why they want more and more subsidy, of course they do, it's easy. Anyone can make something work. We've got 100% subsidy. The real challenge is if we want to scale this up and crack this retrofit in a genuine scale, rather than just provide a nice living for a niche sector. If we're going to do this at real scale, we have to bring in other sources of capital, because in 2014 there is not the public money to meet the challenge at the scale which it needs to be in order to address the problem sufficiently. So we need to put in private sector funding, which means blending, which means using the ECO more efficiently, which means driving costs down, which means making subsidy go further and ideally using less subsidy altogether. So, it's important that you don't make your case simply based on 100% subsidy, which at the moment so much of the industry rests on.
I think that the point I was trying to make, Minister, was rather one about this industry recognising that it needs to look at how it is funded and how it stands on its own 2 feet. John Seinfeld from Penalth in the previous session actually used the phrase, he said we allowed ourselves to be painted as subsidy junkies, and we need to change that. We need to engage customers in the case for energy efficiency.
But you don't change that with PR. You change that by actually changing the basis on which you're funded. You can't change the fact that you're painted as subsidy junkies by simply getting a better PR agency in, or getting your message across, or a more effective press release. The only way you change that is by moving the ratio of subsidy to public finance, to private finance. And at the moment, it is unacceptably high, if not for the status quo, but if we're going to scale up. That's the challenge.
Okay, let me at that point throw
that means reducing the cost of solid wall insulation, and we're working with the industry to try and do that. but it also needs trying to bring in new financing models.
Okay, thank you. Let me at that point throw it open. There's a hand right at the back. There's one over to the left-hand side of the room as I'm looking at it, another one to the right. Let's take 3 questions and then I'll come back for a second round if I can.
Hi, I'm James Lee, Glasgow Business Federation. Thanks, Mr. Barker, for providing some numbers this morning. 129,000 Green Deal assessments, over 400,000 installations, with 20%, up to 20% of energy leaving a building via the windows. Aren't you concerned there's only been one window installation under Green Deal?
Thank you. I'll take 3 and then let the Minister answer those as he wishes. So over to the right, I think to Nigel.
Nigel Banks from Keep. You talked about reducing the cost of solid water installation. I think we saw in statistics released today that nearly 6,000 solid water installed in November, which is an annualised rate of nearly 70,000 a year. So we're moving back up towards the levels of solid water installation we achieved in 2012 again, which enabled the prices to start to drop. The changes that were announced for the solid water minimum of just 20 to 25,000 a year, that's going to have an impact on the industry, which may well drive increased prices again. How many solid walls a year would you like to see being installed in a year through Green Deal and eco combined?
Thank you. And we'll take one more question over on the other side. Thanks, Sally. Take those and then take some answers and then we'll get another 3. Yeah.
Will Ray from Rockall. I welcome the Minister's continued commitment to energy efficiency in the face of political difficulties. I would just like to get 2 commitments straight from today. First, with the upcoming consultation, will you commit to an impact assessment being published for that consultation to compare the economic benefit, which was illustrated last time in the Green Deal, and the eco-impact assessment, which suggested over £8 billion positive impact on the UK economy as a result of his measures. And
Which consultation? Got more than one running now.
No, the upcoming consultation on the changes to...
Oh, the eco consultation.
Yes, correct. So the first, an impact assessment will be published for that assessment. Second, you mentioned also the incentives that are coming in, and we definitely welcome that for new home buyers and consumers, and that particularly targeting solar wall stations. You mentioned that will come in this year. Can you give a commitment that will be available this year?
Okay.
The rebate. Yes. Right. Firstly, Windows. Yes, I think if I had to single out any area where I really want to do more, it's Windows. And I think not least because of the market dynamic. I think Anglian Windows on their own, they're the leading supplier. They install something like Windows in 1,100 homes every week. And that's a phenomenal amount, and we need to do more to tap into and use the momentum in that market. And people say, the Green Deal interest rate is too high. Do you know what the APR they offer on their interest rate is? It's about 24%. If you want to use their finance, it doesn't seem to inhibit them selling 1,100 sets of Windows every week. And we need to do more. Now, when I've looked at this more closely, the problem with more closely aligning the Green Deal is the carbon saving. There actually are very few homes, relatively speaking, in the UK that don't have any sort of double glazing now. So most of the window replacements are putting new windows in to replace some sort of slightly grotty 70s or 80s windows. There are obviously where you can find homes that don't have double glazing, that's a clear win, and it scores much more easily in terms of the golden rule. But it is quite challenging, both in terms of carbon and energy saving, to address the replacement market. But as I said, I see windows as being very important because they go with what the home improvement ethic that lies at the heart of the Green Deal, which is give people what they want, rather than try and get them to do something that's worthy. Get them to have a Green Deal because they want to replace their boiler, they want to replace their windows, because they want solar panels on their roof, they want to put in a new heating system and take advantage of the RHI. And we've got to more closely align the Green Deal. So we're working on that. And if you've got particular ideas around how we can more closely tap into that window market, I would love to hear them. In terms of solid wall ambition, there is this sort of catch-22 argument here around the cost of solid wall, the amount of funding that there is available for eco, how much we put on people's bills. And although the direction of travel under the coalition has to put less of the levies onto people's bills and to take them into general taxation. So when we came in, for example, we took off the last government's levy on bills for carbon capture and storage, which was about £1 billion. We took off the previous government's intention to levy the RHI on bills and to fund that out of general taxation. And we are very mindful of the impact on consumer bills. We recognise that there is a finite amount that the British consumer can absorb on their bills. And there is no absolutely magic number there, but it's a question of political and political judgment really about what the right balance is. We think we've got it about right, and that then means how do you carve up the eco cake? Now, in an ideal world, I would like to see far more solid wall insulation numbers, and not just an ideal world. In the long term, if we're going to meet our 2030 targets, we have to roll out solid wall insulation. But I think we're going to need to do it in a way that's more cost effective at scale than we're currently able to do. So I would like to see more research and development, more partnership working to try and bring down the cost of solid wall insulation. Because we do, in order to make it as freely available as we'd like it to be and as a compelling proposition, we can't do it with such a high amount of subsidy. So that means closer working with the industry to help bring down costs. We're doing that in other areas, like we're very successfully in the wind industry, for example, where we've got a really good group that's working to bring down the cost of that particular technology. We need to see a greater commitment on both sides, including government, to help working with solid wall insulation to bring those costs down. Lower the cost, the more we can deploy. Eco-impact assessment, I will need to double check. There is a trade-off here between speed and being comprehensive. My assumption is that we will be publishing I don't know if any of my officials in the room know the answer to this. Yes, Richard, we are. We will be, exactly. As I insisted, we will be publishing an impact assessment. Thank you, Richard. With the impact assessment. And in terms of the rebate, you bet it won't just be this year. We'll be announcing this by the spring. And you can tell I'm a minister for a while now, so I'm very, very conversant in civil services. But we will be making details of this launching the scheme in the next few months, not sometime this year.
Minister, thank you very much. I'm afraid time has got the better of us. We must move on. We're going to hear from your shadow in a moment. But thank you very much for your time this morning.